friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley Ariana, joined by the wonderful Steph Sanchez. I am getting a notification that it won't be live on Twitter because I guess you need to be premium on that now. Why are they doing that? And do you have that? Have you
I
ever
hadn't even
been?
heard that they were doing that.
I just thought like a little, like as I hit live, where it has your like icon, I have like a little
Mhm.
exclamation point in red. It's like, you're doing something wrong and
Interesting.
scary. But anyways, don't mean to be talking about that. It didn't show up until I went live. But hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining me and joining Steph and I. We have a lot of news to talk to you about, but I thought that maybe I would just ask you how your weekend is. I know you said it, or how your weekend was. I know you said it was pretty hot up there. Um I just ate a bunch of sugar. I like found a recipe to make homemade granola, which I've done a bunch, but I made like homemade granola, banana bread because I had these blueberries that I wanted to get rid of, and then made like chocolate bars. And when you're just like eating a bunch of stuff as you're cooking, I did that. And I've been obsessed. I wonder what is in beets because I've been obsessed with beets recently. But yeah, I just had a bunch of sugar. I feel like I feel it. Do you like
Should be an
beets? I feel
interesting
like
show.
my dad doesn't like beets because they taste like earthy, but I've been craving them.
Yeah, they're good in certain, you know, certain settings, I guess.
Really like okay, a different thing that I'll ask you maybe if you like. I've been going out to dinner a little bit more, and I've gone to a couple Italian places. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Piccata, chicken piccata, where they have like it's like a white wine, lemony sauce with capers. And the only time I've ever even seen capers is like on when I was in New York, they had them like on bagels. But anyways, that's my journey with food. I know you've been experimenting with lots of sparkling waters, and that's the content that everyone's here for, of course. But I want to say hi to Daniel, who says, Happy Monday, everyone. Happy Monday. Thank you so much for joining us, as always. I guess I can move off of food and get into some interesting and in my opinion, actually, I will say surprising rankings. ESPN put out their top 10 quarterback rankings list. Were you able to see it so far?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. But I think what's particularly interesting is this isn't just a writer for ESPN that votes on or that is, coming up with this list for himself. It's voted on by coaches, NFL execs, scouts, higher ups within the NFL. And for people who haven't seen this list, I'll name, 1 through 10, but surprise, surprise, Brock Purdy is not on the list at all. And I found that to be pretty shocking at this point of his career. Maybe it made sense, his first year, depending on if it's just a fluke or what. But are you surprised? I mean, I feel like as 49er content creators, we're kind of gearing up talking about paying Brock Purdy 50, 60 million next year. I was shocked, not to give it away, because like I said, I'll go 1 through 10, but like Jared Goff is ahead of him. I was pretty shocked by these things. Oh, can't hear you, Steph. Hi.
I don't know about shocked, but I mean, definitely, I guess, slightly surprised, a little disappointed, but not totally surprised at the same time because I think this is now a theme that we've seen with Brock Purdy and kind of like I don't want to call it disrespect. I think it's just often forgotten in these conversations or yeah, like I mean, he's not respected as much as maybe some other quarterbacks are. And he's not given the benefit of the doubt in situations like, oh, it's all about Kyle Shanahan. He's in this quarterback friendly scheme and they just everyone discounts what Brock Purdy does. So like I'm used to it at this point, you know. I think I am disappointed a little bit, but I can't be too surprised.
feel like it made it more shocking for me that it's something that's voted on by coaches and staff. To me, if maybe national media talking heads are kind of not giving Brock Purdy his credit, that makes sense. But for people who watch film, to me, there should be a greater understanding of what Brock Purdy has achieved. Maybe what I'll do right now is I will read down the list and we can go one by one and talk about it a little bit. We don't obviously have to spend that much time, but just for people who didn't see this, ESPN's top 10 rankings. Number one, Patrick Mahomes, Chiefs. No problem, of course. To me, he's in a league of his own. Um, if he's not, above Tom Brady now, I think eventually he will be. I think that no problems with that, obviously. Now, kind of off the bat, I have an issue. Joe Burrow, number two. How do you feel about that? If you're ranking top 10 quarterbacks, is Joe Burrow your number two?
Probably not, but I guess I could see it. It's just like all this is so subjective. Um, so I feel like the top 3, top 4, you agree on the guys that are in that top, let's just say
But maybe not
5,
the order. That makes
but
sense.
not the order. Yeah, exactly. So I just see it as that. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many exact scouts and coaches were um, part of this, to get that aggregate number. But yeah, I guess people respect Joe Burrow quite a bit.
Something that I also find interesting really quickly, and we won't spend too much on Joe Burrow, but something that I find interesting about him being number two is this list does change every year and seemingly is based off of the year prior. For example, just Deshaun Watson was on it last year as like an honorable mention. Um, so I guess what is kind of confusing to me is if this is based on last year, Joe Burrow also got injured pretty early. So it's even more surprising to me that he solidified that number two spot. And
Yeah,
I'm not trying to diminish him because I do agree with you. I think maybe that for me, I think the top 3 to 4, uh, mixing up the order, Patrick Mahomes, everyone has him on at the top, but they seem to all be kind of interchangeable. Number 3 is Josh Allen. I would have Josh Allen number 2, but I understand that it feels like Joe Burrow and Josh Allen are kind of constantly being compared, not necessarily that they play the same game, but in that level that's like an elite level, but under Patrick Mahomes. So
yeah,
Josh Allen, number 3. Once again, we don't have problems with these guys being up here. Lamar Jackson, number 4, Ravens. Interesting. I mean, obviously MVP, an elite quarterback, but also has gotten tons of criticism for his performances in the playoffs. Not putting that all on him. I definitely think the Ravens defense had some problems. Number 5, Matthew Stafford, which I want to read really quickly, and I have 2 different things pulled up. But going to Matthew Stafford, I feel like the reasoning behind why they have him at number 5 might end up giving us insight onto why Brock Purdy was left off this list. And it says some evaluators see Stafford as a bit of a kingsmaker. He elevates the play of those around him, a high-ranking official within an NFL team said. Puka Nakua is a good player, but he's not the same without Stafford. Stafford helps those guys reach their potential. Players are better when they play with Stafford than if they were to play with another. So maybe if I'm taking that logic, maybe what people would say is like and I think as 49er fans, we could actually disagree with this, right? Because we have I think George Kittle would say, I'm performing better. Brock Purdy has made me a better player. But I think maybe outside of people who pay attention solely to the 49ers, maybe they feel like Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, even George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, those guys are going to be elite players no matter what the quarterback is doing. Where they're looking at someone like Matthew Stafford and saying Puka Nakua could be a B, C player, but Stafford makes him an A. And maybe people feel like Brock Purdy isn't going to take a B or C player and make him an A. He's working with A players and they're performing like A players. that to me feels like the logic behind leaving him off this list. Which is why, like I said, I highlighted that quote because when I was reading the article, I was like, okay, maybe this is a logic, which I feel like is fair for us as fans to actually disagree with, because I think we have seen players perform better under Brock Purdy, but I can see that that's still maybe not like a league wide fact yet. You know what I mean? Like I think people when they're critiquing Brock Purdy, they still use the weapons against him versus
Mhm.
using Brock Purdy as someone who's enhancing his weapons.
Right, yeah, and I think what Matthew Stafford, in this example has going for him is the fact that he has actually played somewhere else where we could see that in two different sample sizes, he's stayed a good quarterback and he's stayed in that range. So there's a bigger sample size in terms of how many years Matthew Stafford has played, and then also the weapons that he's had throughout his career. So yeah, I mean, I'm okay with Stafford being there.
I'm
But to
totally
your
okay with
point,
Stafford being there. I was more like
yeah, to
trying to
your
notice
point, I mean,
maybe
Brock,
what was yeah.
I
I
think
was trying to figure
you're
out
on
like, okay,
something.
like what critique or what criteria are they grading these guys from? Something that you said is longevity, which if I was ranking quarterbacks, even when we were talking about head coaches last week, I think longevity is super important. And there's a critical error if longevity is a part of this ranking system in this list, in my opinion. So number 5 was Stafford, number 6, Justin Herbert. When they kind of listed why, they talked about all his elite, basically physical skills, maybe mental makeup. Um, I can understand that. I'm interested to see how he'll do this year. He obviously hasn't had the success on the field, but I think he's had coaching and players around him reasonings for that. But it will be interesting to see how he performs now that he has what I think everyone considers a really competent coach. Um, Scary that the coach is is now with the 49ers, the one that we're saying wasn't competent. But where I go kind of turn my head a little and go, huh? Is the number 7 is CJ Stroud. Now, CJ Stroud obviously performed incredibly last year. And I think he's a hell of a player. I'm so happy for D'Amico Ryans. I'm excited to see CJ Stroud this year. I'm excited to watch the Texans because of him. And I don't doubt that he'll continue this. I'm not one of the people who kind of like with Purdy, they were like, oh, wait for him to fall back to reality. I don't feel that way about CJ Stroud. I believe he'll be able to keep it up. However, if we're making this rankings just based on 1 year or just based on what just happened in the past, I do find it kind of premature to put CJ Stroud at number 7 on this list when he's really only done it for 1 year. Because yes, he was incredible, but it's still possible that that was a fluke. And like I said, I don't think it was, but to me, it seems unfair to the other quarterbacks who have been doing it for longer to have a guy who's only performed so well 1 year, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like in this case for CJ Stroud, I don't know who I would put ahead of him in in this case. Like if we're trying to argue that CJ Stroud should be lower, who should go in front of him? Should Aaron Rodgers go in front of him because he's had so many years in the league and now like he hasn't performed at the same level that he has in his prime. I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers, right? Like so I honestly I'd take Aaron Rodgers off the top 10 list in 2024. But I don't know. I'd maybe have him a few notches down. But anyway, going back to CJ Stroud, I mean, I
I guess
think,
I see your point. I guess I see your point. Um,
yeah,
I
I
will
just
say
don't know who would go ahead of him. I mean, he's in his one season, he's proven to be better, way better than Jared Goff. He's better than Brock Purdy. He's better than Dak. Like, so I don't know where I would put him. I understand what you're saying that he's only played 1 year. It could be a fluke. Well, if it's a fluke, then that'll be reflected in the pre 2025 rankings, right?
true, very true. Okay, all right. You convinced me of it. I liked that, Steph. And then Number 8, they did have Aaron Rodgers right behind CJ Stroud, and I kind of attaching to your logic, I think Aaron Rodgers is solely there because of his history. Because last year he didn't play at all, and the year before he had a bad year. So I actually was kind of surprised that Aaron Rodgers was so high up. But I guess also it makes sense when you talk about the people behind him. Um, he's definitely had a more, you know, honorable career. But then they have Jared Goff at number 9, kind of crazy to me, and then Dak Prescott at 10. I think that Brock Purdy should be above Jared Goff. I also think Dak Prescott should be above Jared Goff, I think. And I
Yeah.
also so I don't know. I think my list would have potentially Dak above Purdy or Purdy right above Dak. I have a hard time going back and forth. I feel like last year that was quite a conversation because they were both in the MVP race. And like one of them would have a really good game and everyone would be like, see, he's the guy. And then the next week, the other one, I think, I remember there was like a 3-pick game for Dak. And then everyone was like, see, don't mention Dak with Purdy. But I really do think that they have been pretty neck and neck, at least last year. I think I would put them both above Jared Goff, and
Yeah.
maybe just my bias, I'd probably put Purdy above Dak. So I think I would put Purdy, Dak, Goff, Aaron Rodgers, based on now, not based on like career history, but based on what I project them to be this year and going forward. And yeah.
I think that's reasonable. I don't think Goff belongs in the top 10
Having him number
conversation.
9 right behind Aaron Rodgers and above Dak seems kind of wild to me. And I sound like such a Jared Goff hater, but and I don't mean to come off that way because I am impressed. Like he's gone to 2 Super Bowls with 2 different teams. Like that's not a fluke. You don't do that by being bad. So I'm not trying to say that. I just think he has areas of weakness. Like I guess you could say maybe there's times he could throw the football farther down the field than Brock Purdy, but I don't think Goff. Like when we're talking about putting quarterbacks in the Niners position with all the offensive weapons that the Niners have and Kyle Shanahan, I think Brock would do better in this system than Jared Goff was because Goff is kind of a statue. I think there's not enough credit given to Purdy for his elusiveness. If any of the people watching or if you have been watching that receiver show, it's obviously not focused on the quarterbacks, but every once in a while there's bits of the game, ruffled in, and it'll kind of spark reminders for me of last season and just what a great job Brock Purdy did at evading pressure, making throws on the run with, defenders in his face coming at him. That's stuff that I don't know. I just don't think he gets enough credit for. People talk about his poise and maybe his like mannerisms and his kind of like mental toughness, but I actually think he's like has some good physical traits. I think his elusiveness, specifically with this team, the 49ers, they get tons of credit for their weapons as they should, for their coach as they should, but their offensive line has been really bad, and you need a quarterback who can kind of use his legs. And I think he's definitely better than Goff at that, and maybe even better than Dak at that at this point in Dak's career. I'm not saying forever, but since surgery, Dak has definitely struggled a lot with the mobility aspect of his game, at least comparatively to what he was at. And I think that's an underrated aspect of Brock Purdy's skill set. I wonder if this year, some of that stuff will stand out more because I believe that 49er fans know that, but it feels like something the national media and apparently even coaches who are watching film just kind of don't give, a lot of credit for yet.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, I think when you're asked to rank quarterbacks, is like, okay, what exactly are we ranking? Are we ranking talent level? Like, just because if I'm looking at talent level alone, I'm probably looking at Dak being higher than, Goff, for sure,
Yeah.
just off of the athleticism. He's a better quarterback in that sense. I think he'd be better than Brock Purdy in that sense. I'd even say like when we have the debate about Jordan Love versus Brock Purdy, it's kind of similar, right? Jordan Love, like, yeah, no shit. Like he's
Great
very
receiver.
athletic. He's an awesome quarterback as far as being able to accurately throw downfield as well. Like he has a higher talent level than Brock Purdy does. But that's not all that quarterbacking is. And I think Brock Purdy is very good, maybe one of the best in the league as far as aspect. I mean, the processing is one thing that everyone talks about, and I think that's something that's maybe not considered too much in these rankings, and why Brock Purdy, seems to fall out of the wayside whenever it comes to getting any respect from people. I think people who understand that about quarterbacking and that is important see Brock Purdy and defend Brock Purdy, and it's a lot of the same people. A lot of quarterbacks love Brock Purdy and talk highly about him because they know what it takes to play the position, and they know that Brock Purdy does it at a high level. It's like
Yeah.
all these other people who don't always think about that aspect, the mental aspect of playing the game, and it does reach. It gives him an advantage, or it puts him in higher up in the conversation as far as like quarterbacking goes, even despite him being less gifted, like physically.
Completely agree, and we have some comments that I think are interesting. Um, some people are saying Dak has an injury history right now. Top 3 California QBs, Brock is number 3. That's kind of funny. Um, and then wait, really quickly, A is this Aaron? Who is AR8? Was slinging it in Tahoe? I didn't know who that they were talking about there.
Yeah,
I was thinking
probably. He
about
was in Tahoe.
the golf tournament that just happened.
Yeah, he
Did
was in
you
Tahoe.
see, Jerry Rice? Was it Jerry Rice who was asked, he, like, yelled at a reporter who asked him about, how the Chiefs were how the reporter asked something like, "Do you still believe that the Chiefs can have success even though they haven't addressed the receiver position or something?" And I think it was at the end of a long golf day or something, but Jerry Rice he was like, "Don't ask me about that. I'm always gonna be team Niners," and stuff, and I don't know, it was like it went
I
kinda
heard I
like
heard
mini
about it. I was
viral on
just
the
like, yeah, yeah. I was like, it probably wasn't as big a deal as people were making it out to seem.
true. And then I cannot pronounce his name, but said, Puka was cooking with Wentz throwing to him. Bro is definitely an A player. Yeah, I don't think that the people ranking Stafford were trying to down Puka. I think they were just trying to say that Stafford has a history with the incredible receivers he's worked with as getting, helping them reach their limits, which I think like Cooper Cup and guy on the lines that I'm blanking on right now. How am I blanking on his name? My dad's watching, like, how do you not know this? Barry Sanders? Is that right? No. Um,
Uh, who
I
did
think Matthew
who are
Stafford
you?
gets a lot out of his
Calvin Johnson?
Yep,
Who
that's
who are you talking about?
Calvin Johnson. Exactly,
Oh, okay.
exactly. I was talking about Matthew Stafford getting the most out of his receivers, even if they are really good receivers on their own within their own right. Really quickly, hell no, for all time, QB Mahomes isn't number 1. The true rankings are number 1, Joe Montana, Tom Brady, Dan Marino. I think that this stuff is very subjective.
Well, not just that. It's not an all-time list. I think it's
Yeah.
just like a right now list.
Yeah. I think this comment might have been in response to me saying something where I think, like, at the end of Patrick Mahomes' career, he might be even more
Oh,
well known than Tom Brady. Um, I think it's
about
pretty,
well known, but
I don't know. I think it's pretty universal that Tom Brady is the best, but I obviously know this is a 49ers channel, and I know that my dad feels like Joe Montana is the true number 1 quarterback of all time, which I love the passion for that. Um, CJ Stroud might be a good QB, but no way is he top 10. Come on. He's only done it for 1 year. Both Goff and Purdy are a lot better than I I understand the case of longevity. I think what you were saying, Steph, the distinguishing like talent. CJ Stroud just has more talent than both of these players. And if he's able to continue the success that he had for this year, I I don't feel protective as a 49er fan to try to say that Brock Purdy is as good as that. CJ Stroud is very, very special. So, and you can't compare eras, is what other people are saying. And then this guy was saying he does agree it was Aaron Rodgers. So I'm glad that I was right on that one. But maybe moving off of the quarterback rankings, unless you have any. Oh, I wanted to say, so for the honorable mentions, they did mention Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts. What do you think this year? I think potentially we worked it out and talked about the mobility, but do you think that there's a way to like solidify Brock Purdy on that top 10 list next year? Like, what does he need to do this year?
I think he needs to do it again, right? Like
Yeah, just do it
whatever
again.
he did, do it again. Yeah, because I mean, we got to remember much of the season he was an MVP candidate, right? And rightfully so based on what he did. But I think people think Brock Purdy is a fluke, right? I think he had his first full season last year. And it's not just the fact that people think he's a fluke. I think they think that the scheme, the team around him carries him. And so the more that he does it, I think it's going to be harder for people to say that. The more adversity he faces as a quarterback, whereas, like for example, when Deebo Samuel was out for 3 games, that hurt the entire team. I don't think it just hurt Brock Purdy. But just that's an example of something that could help Brock Purdy make that case, or us make that case for Brock Purdy, is if he's missing some of those key guys and he's still able to win. I know he's done it. He has done it. You don't have to tell me. I already have him in I'd have him in the top 10. I'd probably have him at number 10 in that list. But I'm just saying for other people, I think he would have to do those things. But at the end of the day, I feel like there's always this goalpost moving for Brock Purdy. Like we've seen it already so many
Feel
times.
like
It's
that,
like,
like, even last year, right? Like, it feels like
yeah,
he's
yeah,
consistently been, like, told, like, "Oh, just do this, just prove this, just
do,
do," and then he,
yeah,
like,
do
does
that.
that,
He does
and
it.
there's, like, a new thing, like, he reaches
Yeah,
that limit, and they're like, "Okay, well, now this." But I do think you're
yeah,
right. I
exactly.
think especially, like, when thinking, because 'cause I still have the CJ Stroud thing stuck in my head. I think what it is that like when you watch a guy like CJ Stroud, the talent is visible. You see it right away in each game. It's like you see him throwing it far, you see him being tough, you see him being mobile. But specifically really having that strong arm and being able to utilize that. I think with a skill set like Brock Purdy's, it is super impressive. And I agree with some of the comments that said he doesn't need to do anything but continue doing what he's doing. And I think maybe with his type of skill set, it's not that it's not as impressive or it's not that it's like not as good, it is, but maybe it's one of those things that's like it's harder to recognize. So it is something that you just have to consistently do. And then all of a sudden there's kind of like this entire history to like look back on and be like, yeah, like this is something. It's not, luck. It's not happenstance. It's not the receiver position, doing it for him. I know that that will be the next, even if Brock Purdy does well this upcoming year, as long as, and once again, I'm under the assumption I think Ayuk will be there. But I think if he has his playmakers, it's going to be the same thing. Well, once they pay him, he has to prove that he can do it without all his stars around him. Like I can already predict the next
Yep.
benchmarker that he's going to have to do. Um, I will say, and hopefully this isn't premature. I think Brock Purdy can do that. I think he's been in a position where he's constantly had to reach a goalpost, and he's outshined and met every target that he's been asked to meet, and yeah, been very impressive. Rick says, "Hey Steph, what's your opinion? Do you think the Niners are going to start and win against the Jets?" I just wanted to say hi to Rick because he's in all of our streams, and we always really appreciate all your comments, Rick.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. Yeah, I think they are going to be the Jets. That's going to be a tough team, but I think the 49ers are going to have. I feel like the Jets have more changes this offseason that took place, and so I think they're still going to be gelling. Whereas the 49ers, I think for the most part, like I mean, on offense, it's a lot of the same guys, same starters. So yeah, I think that's going to be the 49ers advantage in that game. And of course, they're playing at home. So, um, yeah, I'm going to give the edge to the Niners there.
I have the edge to the Niners there as well. Obviously, I think the key to that game is kind of out of the 49ers' hands. I mean, obviously, we have the defense, but it's going to be how does Aaron Rodgers look? How does he perform? Are the Jets in a rhythm with him? Because this is, even though he was on the team last year, this is his first year rolling back. If he pulls a Brock Purdy and just, everyone was kind of anticipating a slow start for him coming off his elbow injury and he hit the ground running. If Rodgers can do something like that, it's going to be a really tough game. If there's some growing pains, then I'm glad that the 49ers are facing the Jets now. And then I think to end off the QB discussion, Rob was saying Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Stroud are still better than him. I think that that's fine. I agree. I don't feel like as a 49er fan, I need Brock Purdy to be, the number one quarterback in the league. I want, a top 10 quarterback, and I think that we have that. And who's the Jets OC? LMAO. So making fun of them doing the Nathaniel Hackett thing there. Yeah, they have a ton of bad juju coming in because isn't it? I heard lots of rumors that Nathaniel Hackett knew that he was, going to be asked to step down, but then they couldn't find anyone, so they kept him last minute. Wouldn't want to be a Jets fan right now. I saw something I know someone else just mentioned Aaron Rodgers in Tahoe. I saw it was like a grown man crying to Aaron Rodgers in all like Jets gear, being like, I want to win a Super Bowl. And I was like, dude, you got to put your faith in something else because I feel bad for you. I feel bad for you. But we're gonna move off of the quarterback talk for now. I did find that was interesting, not because it was a normal list, but because it was voted on by people who I think we as fans respect. A lot of these head coaches and stuff, I expect to have maybe a deeper knowledge than like a Nick Wright or who, Colin Coward. Not saying, and I like both of those people. I'm just saying, I feel like if it's a talking head, you can kind of be like, oh, like people are biased. But when it's a coach, you kind of anticipate that they have more real criteria or something. I don't know. I usually give more input into that, but I liked your question too. Like, did they survey every coach or just certain ones? And were these coaches really putting their thoughts into it, or just kind of writing something down quickly before, getting to whatever off-season program they're trying to schedule? All that stuff is good to remember because I know there's a different award that players vote on, and I always kind of took more stock into that. And then I think it was either Grant or Larry who were in the locker room, and they're saying that players just are scribbling down something super fast before practice and usually just writing down their teammates. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't put so much more stock into this than any other ranking. But Deebo Samuel went on Twitter. I don't know if this was maybe in response to some of the talks coming off the show Receiver on Netflix. I know that you previewed episode 1. I've watched a couple episodes so far, or maybe it's just in response to different content creators or media analysis that have been talking over this offseason or over the last couple of years when it comes to the 49ers. What Debo tweeted was, I wish MFR stop acting like it's so easy to win or to get to a Super Bowl and winning. I don't think y'all really get it and understand it for real, for real. And then the little emoji, like, I'm going to stop talking now. I said too much type of thing. He tweeted this out. When did you see this? What was your reaction to seeing this? Why do you think he tweeted this out? I speculated in my preamble to that before I read it, who I thought maybe he was talking to, but what do you think sparked this conversation, and what do you think Debo meant by this?
I mean, I have to imagine it wasn't just a single occurrence or maybe even one recent incident that had him thinking this. It's probably a series of things that he's seen, maybe a trend that he's seen. Like, I mean, he's probably heard something that's made him feel this way a few times since 2019, like since he's entered the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
league and like gone to the Super Bowl the first time, right? And yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
in
I
that
think
show, he literally did him and Kittle both said, "Hey, it's really hard to get back." So,
yeah, and I think like the assumption is that like, well, you're a good team, so it should be easy for you to go to the Super Bowl. You're one of the 5 best teams in the NFL, right? And I think for like when it comes to like dynasties or teams that are just that good, like think of the Patriots, think of the Chiefs now. I think teams like that kind of do the perception that it's easy to go to the Super Bowl and
yeah.
win a Super Bowl, right?
Even
Because
as
those
fans,
teams
like
do it.
last year, you and I would get I know in our show, we'd be like, "Oh, we just need to speed race to the playoffs," you know? Like, I've
Yeah,
heard
I
lots
like
of
you
it's
almost
not
you
that we
almost
don't
feel like
enjoy
it's a
each
given.
game, but it's like we have this expectation, where the players who are actually playing each game, they're like, "Hey, this is hard." Like, it's not just a given that we're gonna do that.
Exactly. It's not just a given. And there's so many other factors than just being a good team on paper when the season starts that go that play into it, right? Like we know injuries, like you do have to have as in
Luck.
Invader 49er says, you do need some luck in it. And
Every
so
team,
that's
every team.
something that exactly, and that's something that I think people often forget. And so, Devo just wanted to remind people. I don't know, like maybe it's a way to deflect some of the pressure that he and his teammates could be feeling too, because it's like, hey, this is the last dance with this group, right? You guys made it to the Super Bowl last year. We were all expecting you to win. You didn't win. Okay, now it's really like Super Bowl or bust, right? Like this year, the season's a failure if you don't get a Super Bowl, which is true. Like I would say this would be a failure if the 49ers didn't win a Super Bowl. But
I
I still think that like there's a lot of pressure that is counterproductive to getting you there. Like I don't think players feeling pressured to get to the Super Bowl helps them get there. Like think of the Cowboys. Think, there's a lot of pressure there. I don't think any of that helps them. I think it hurts them more than the pressure because I mean, I think they've shown they can't really handle the pressure. But like, I think that's just an example of like pressure not always being good. So I think maybe
you
Debo
almost
can
saw
feel the
the
pressure.
Cowboys put pressure on themselves last year when facing the 49ers, and I agree, it's almost
Absolutely,
like they worked themselves up too much and
it's a mental
yeah,
battle.
mentally put
Yeah.
themselves out of it. I agree with that, and I think Debo's saying a couple things, and, um, like I said, I'm inferring this tweet while also having the information of at least, referring I don't wanna spoil it for anyone who hasn't watched it, but if you've just watched the first episode, let's say, I do know that Debo Samuel and Kittle both which is horrible because the way the show works is it's like filmed in chronological order. So episode 1, they're reflecting only on the Super Bowl loss of 2019 and of getting to the NFC championships. They don't even have the knowledge yet that they just won or that
Yeah.
they just lost the Super Bowl. Like as we're watching it, we know the season you're preparing for, you just lost the Super Bowl again. And they're already
Mhm.
talking about just how heavy of a load it is to kind of carry the pressure to win every season. And you hear fans say, like, if it's Super Bowl or bust, and it feels like the players kind of take that on, and they know that that is the expectation of this fan base. And I'm not critiquing someone who has that expectation. I know that this organization has a really high standard, and I think they higher. I think it's important to them to keep that standard, but that weight is definitely felt by the players. And they feel like it's taken them so much work to just accomplish what they've accomplished, and they know how long it took them to, get back to a Super Bowl at this point. So, I think what Debo is saying is just like, and maybe just him tweeting it out is also just a way of him like kind of venting, like maybe
Yeah.
he was feeling the pressure or the stress, and he can kinda just tweet something and, like, get it out of his brain a little bit. Because all these players are trying to reset and, come into this year with the expectation that they're gonna go back to the Super Bowl again this year. So, I think, maybe this is all a part of the process of kind of for each individual player, whatever they need to do to get their mind right to show up next week with, the mindset that they're gonna be able to get all the way back there again. Because it's not easy and it takes a lot of luck, as I think it was Invader, or it's literally right there. It is Invader. Invader 49er says, injury luck, a certain play going away, certain call going your way. As 49ers
Yeah.
fans, if you watch that Super Bowl back, just like the amount of fumbles that you recover, like stuff that is definitely obviously you want to have some sense of control and everyone to execute as much as they can, but there's also just something, to the way the ball bounces that day, you know. But yeah. Did you have any other thoughts on Debo's tweet at all?
No, I mean, I know people were like speculating, what it all means, but kind of like what I think it was Invader 49er that said accumulation of frustration. I think that's all it is. And I think it's good for Debo to get that out and also remind people that it isn't easy.
I think I like what Rick is saying, and there's been a lot of critiques with Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, and I've been one of them, of it doesn't matter if you get all the way there, if you're always losing, eventually the history books, are not gonna Jimmy Ward he left the 49ers and doesn't have a Super Bowl ring. And in my head, that team with him on it should have, it should be in the history books of the NFL as this superior team. And now they won't be because they didn't get that accomplishment. So obviously, I don't down anyone who says getting the Super Bowl is the most important. But what I will say, and what I like that Rick kind of brings up here, is there is something to, if you want to win, you got to at least be in the dance. And I think he's pulling up a Michael Jordan quote with, in order to win the game, you got to be in the game. Um, and that's something that I do appreciate with having all the, such a star-studded team and having a coach like Kyle Shanahan, is I have faith that you can at least get into the playoffs. And I think if with, a mostly healthy roster and Kyle Shanahan, mostly if you have a healthy quarterback, Kyle Shanahan, and a mostly healthy roster in the playoffs, I don't care what seed you are, I think that gives them, a fighter's chance where I would bet on the 49ers. And I think that maybe isn't a way that all fans feel about their football team. And so I think, that's just step one. And in the show Receiver, you kind of see how each one of these levels are important. It's important to win your division. It's important to win, get that number one seed. Then it's important to be able to get to the Super Bowl, and how tired they were by the time they got to the Super Bowl, even though they had that number one seed. All that stuff is important. But I like that Rick Diaz brought up that Jordan quote and just said that,
Yeah.
in order to win, you got to at least be in the dance. And I don't know. I feel like you feel similarly. Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy, to me, give the 49ers a chance to get into the dance, at least.
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And so I think that's why the expectations are always going to be high when Kyle Shanahan is the coach.
Agree. Now, I wanted to, because I've mentioned the show Receiver a little bit, and like I said, don't want to spoil the thing for people who haven't watched it all. So I'm only going off of some of the notes that I took for episode 1. But I saw Peyton Manning win, and this could just be, a catchy intro into the show, but when kind of introducing the switch from the previous year where they covered quarterbacks to wide receivers, they Peyton Manning was saying, receivers and tight ends are actually a quarterback's best friend more so than offensive line. And when he was saying that, because he was saying, everyone says offensive line is a quarterback's best friend, but really it's the guy catching the ball. And when he was saying that, first of all, I said, I kind of disagree. That was my first, I was like just listening and I was like, oh, that was obviously kind of just for an intro, but I disagree. And then I giggled because then I said, well, if Kyle Shanahan is watching this, he's probably like, that's what I'm saying. Well, they critique me for that. They critique me for that. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the more important position group? Offensive line or receiver? What is more important? Which one is a quarterback's best friend?
I mean, I still think I could see why people would say receiver, because if you have a good receiver who can get open and could get open quickly, then I mean, you could scheme around an offensive line. Like now, just for the sake of the question, I will say receivers is more important. I still think you could strike a balance between the two where you have a good offensive line. A good offensive line is still going to do you some favors, like it's still going to help you and raise your ceiling a little bit. But I mean, you need a good receiving group, to be able to actually move the chains at the end of the day.
Um, I completely agree. Obviously, a team with talent on, in every position group is most important. And this is like the long debate, right? Even if you look at the Bengals when they were deciding between Jamar Chase and Penei Sewell, right? No, Penei Sewell is not the guy.
Who is
Why is
their
he stuck
offensive
in my head?
lineman?
Why is he? I don't know why Penei
No,
Sewell is
it's
stuck
not
in my head.
Peninsula.
But
Um,
it was an offensive lineman versus getting Jamar Chase, and everyone thought they were going to go O line, especially because Joe Burrow just got, his knee obliterated, and then they get Chase, and that very year they go to the Super Bowl, and it's like, okay, they made a great decision, but then it's kind of a shot in the dark because then you've seen them not be able to win the Super Bowl because Joe Burrow was being attacked and not protected and didn't have a good O lineman or didn't have a good offensive line to protect him. Then you've seen him in years since then also get injured once again because his offensive line is always breaking down. And I'm not putting, obviously there's some, and I feel like people will say this about Brock too. There's something to a quarterback needs to be able to protect himself and move and stuff. But we saw in the Super Bowl, if I bring it back to the 49ers, that I think having a little bit extra protection for Brock Purdy could have helped Brock Purdy get the ball in the hands of his wide receivers. And it doesn't really matter, in my opinion, how skilled your wide receivers are if your quarterback doesn't have a second to throw to you. But
it could be both. At different points, like it could be both. Yeah.
totally agree. Like I said, I think it was just a way of them introing the season. I don't think it was something Peyton Manning would swear by or anything, but it was something I wrote down because I was like, huh, interesting. Um, really quickly, I'm gonna bring it back to the comments because love having Niner Gang in here. He's been a long time supporter of the channel. Honestly, do you two really believe that they get back to the Super Bowl this season? I'll let you take it off before I respond, Steph. Do you think is that
I
messed
mean,
up for me
I have
to throw that one to you?
expectation. I have that hope. I think on paper, you look at this team, it's absolutely talented enough to go to the Super Bowl again. But as we were just talking about, there's so much that goes into being able to get to a Super Bowl than being the best team on paper. And it's just it's hard for me to sit here and think that the cards are going to be in their favor a second year in a row for that to happen. It felt like the stars aligned a little bit in several points, both in 2019 and in 2023 season. So the hope, the expectation sitting here in 2024, but ultimately, if I had to bet, I would bet that they don't. Just for
Yeah,
that.
like odds wise, right?
Yeah, just for that reason of like there's so much that you can't control, that will be stacked up against you. It 2 years in a row is very difficult, very difficult.
I completely agree. I feel like that's what's made the Chiefs run so, shocking and impressive. Same thing if you look back at the Patriots. It's not only just winning it, but just getting there so many times in a row, um, is an insane accomplishment. If we look back last year, it was kind of an anomaly for the 49ers to have both their starting quarterback and their starting running back healthy throughout the year. I think that's one of the first times in quite a while under Kyle Shanahan that both of those position groups starters have been healthy. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I think odds would say it's against the 49ers. I hope this isn't premature. I anticipate they'll be back in the playoffs. Um, even and that's me taking into account that there might be, an injury to either a Debo or a Christian McCaffrey or a Kittle, and who knows. And I'm not wishing that on anyone. I'm just saying it's football. It's a rough and tough sport. There might be an offensive player that has a significant injury, and that can really derail the season. Um, I think there's certain players, as long as they stay healthy, the 49ers still have a chance. That's why I kind of said, if you have Kyle Shanahan, if you have Brock Purdy, Nick Bosa, um, yeah, and one, or some of your offensive weapons, I think that you have I bet the 49ers will go far. I think in order to get back to the Super Bowl, they'd have to have incredible luck like they did last year. And I'm not saying that they won't have that. I think if with everyone they have now, they have the talent, they have the coaching, they have a quarterback. I would hope that as a fan, I hope that they get back, but it does seem like a lot to just kind of feel like, "Oh yeah, I guarantee that they'll get back." They needed a lot of stuff to go their way, not just physically, but also morale wise. Last year, they, were coming into the season swinging. They felt like they had just, kind of gotten screwed over with what happened to them this season, the way the prior season ended. This one, they're kind of coming into the season with um more disappointment than like drive, and maybe by the time the season starts, that'll change, but I do feel like at the start of last season, there was this, like, even Fred Warner has talked about it, this, like, the season doesn't even start until we get it back to the NFC Championship game because, like, we feel like we got cheated here. We feel like we got screwed over and we had the team to win, where now they saw themselves get all the way there and not win, and that can definitely cause a little bit of doubt or worry within players. And hopefully, at this point, once the season starts, you've kind of worked through that over the off season. But I'd be lying if I said I don't think it's going to be a factor. Even just from watching the show Receiver, it feels like it was a little bit of a factor for them in 2019. And obviously, then they had injuries in 2020. And potentially, if they didn't have those injuries, they would have gone a lot further. But it did seem like morale changed. I think that that's why there's the Super Bowl hangover phrase. I don't think it's saying like just because you went to a Super Bowl, you're guaranteed to do bad. But there has to be a human element, an emotional toll that's taken into consideration aside from just the physical luck of it all. So, um, just odds maker wise, I'd say no, but I do think that they'll get in the playoffs, and like that's where maybe my decisions get confusing because I think if you put the 49ers in the playoffs, they have as good as a chance of anyone to get back to the Super Bowl, and I feel pretty confident about that. But just when I kind of take away the playoff aspect of it and just talk about the Super Bowl, then you start thinking about the number 1 seed going against AFC teams once you're there and all that, and it gets a little bit more difficult. But I don't know. At the same time, my money, the 49ers have the team to do it. They should be able to do it, but it just doesn't always happen like that. You know what I mean? I think the Bengals
Yep.
last year, they had a good chance and then they lost their quarterback.
Yep.
Um, Even if you look at the Eagles, they were on like a 10-game winning streak. So there's just no absolutes in football, I feel like. But yeah. Um, I think that that probably wraps up all the topics we have. I'd love next week. I don't know how much of the receiver show you've watched, but I feel like by then more fans would have watched it. So maybe we can add in a couple topics about that. I know that rookie mini camp is happening next week. So we're going to, then also the veterans are going to meet, I think, a week after that. So we're going to have some player interviews, coaching interviews to be able to talk about. Kind of crazy is that the summer's like it's getting close. Are you going to be going to, I think you told me last year, are you going to go to all the training camp or just some of it? What are you doing for that? Do you know yet?
Yeah, the plan is for me to go to all of the training camp practices. So if you guys plan to be there, make sure you say what's up.
Definitely say what's up. Like I said, shout out to everyone in the comments. I really appreciate everyone's comments. Niner Gang says, I think making the playoffs is big. Once they have a taste, it might get done. I kind of agree with that. There could be like an extra gear. And I know some people hate saying that because like they should be playing with the extra gear the whole year or whatever. I don't think it's an intentional thing. I think it could just be like it happens kind of coincidentally once you're there where you just like you didn't even know there was an extra gear, but you find it within those moments. And then Corey says the only two obstacles are Detroit and Green Bay, maybe Philly. It'll be interesting to see, and we'll definitely discuss more of that next week. Thank you so much, Steph, for joining me. Everyone, make sure to like and subscribe to Steph's channel, like and subscribe to my channel. I was supposed to be going live with Tom and got mixed up over the weekend, so I might be going live with him tomorrow. If not, we'll be going on Thursday. And then Marco, for anyone who doesn't know, and I think it's okay for me to say this, but he had some medical stuff going on with his family, which is why I didn't go with him yesterday. So if anyone follows Marco on Twitter, make sure to send him good luck. And him and I will be going live at the end of this week as well. So make sure to stay subscribed to my channel and turn that notification on as the season gets pumped up. I think I was talking to Eric Crocker and might be joining him again as well. So lots of content coming soon as the season starts picking up. I really appreciate everyone for joining us today. Like I said, make sure to subscribe to Steph. Steph, do you have a show? Sometimes you have a show right now, right? Or no?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
it's
have it right now?
I gotta get going.
Perfect.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
so go to my
Okay,
channel.
cool. Everyone go watch Steph's next show literally right now. Bye guys. Thank you so much.